All right, so we're going to go through the review for Unit 5, Summative number 2. So the first thing that you should really be familiar with is the end behavior. This kind of leads into everything else. And end behavior is referring to the arrows of your graph. Like if it looks something like this, or if it looks like that, or this, or maybe that. It's what directions your arrows are pointing. So that all has to do with the degree and the leading coefficient. So the degree is always talking about the highest exponent. Okay, there's a couple different forms that these could be in, but highest exponent. Leading coefficient is always talking about your right arrow. Okay, so when your leading coefficient is positive, out of your two arrows, that means the right one has to be going up. Odd means opposite. So that means the arrows are going in opposite directions. So the first one would be going down. And then even means they're going to go in the same direction. So even and positive would be both up. So then, of course, if the leading coefficient is negative, that means the right arrow's down. Even means they're the same. Odd means opposite. Okay, so we'll refer to those, but please make sure those are correct. So in problems 1 through 3, choose the correct description for the end behavior of the function. So it just means the arrows. Okay. So degree means highest exponent. So on something like this, it's not factors, it's just what is the highest exponent. So the degree on this is 5, that's odd. And then the leading coefficient, we want to know if it's positive or negative. So there's nothing in front of that x to the 5th, which means it's positive because it's just 1. So if you're odd and positive, that's right here, that just means you're down, up. Okay, that's it. So second one, that degree is 7. So that's another odd one. And then the leading coefficient on this one is negative. So odd and negative, that would be up, down. Okay, so maybe pause me, try number 3, and then unpause and check. Okay, so degree on this one, hopefully you notice the 4. We're not adding 4 and 2, we're just doing the 4. So the degree is even. The leading coefficient is positive. So even and positive means they go in the same direction, so both up. Okay, so be able to do that. Pretty much the rest of this, or the most of it, is being able to graph. So just remember, off to the side here, when a factor is squared, your graph has a bounce at that x-intercept. So we'll talk about that in a couple questions here. So when you're in factored form, the degree, again, that's odd or even, is not necessarily the highest exponent. It's like thinking if you were to multiply all these out, what would the highest exponent be? So different case here. Now you just count the x's. I see 3 x's, so the degree is 3. That means it's odd. Okay, leading coefficient on this one would be negative. So going back to my chart, odd and negative would mean up, down. Okay, that's just from there. Okay, so next thing I need is my x-intercepts. So that comes from your factors. So this is a factor. To get the x-intercept, we set that factor equal to 0 and we solve it. So if I subtracted 4, then you're going to get x equals negative 4. So just notice that that's the opposite of positive 4. So this is going to be x equals negative 1, and this is x equals 2. Okay, so those are your 3 x-intercepts. And I'm fine if you just write them like that in positive 2. So we can plot those, right? Here's your x-axis. So negative 4, negative 1, positive 2. And then your y-intercept is always setting x equal to 0 and solving it. So anywhere you see an x, you have to put a 0. Now the tricky part is there's this negative sign here, so you have to put that negative first. And then 0 plus 4, 0 plus 1, 0 minus 2. Okay, so order of operations says parentheses first. 0 plus 4 is 4, 1, negative 2, and then we can multiply these. So negative 4 times 1, that's negative 4. And then negative 4 times 2 is positive 8. So my y-intercept is at 0, 8. So I'm just going to plot that up here. Okay, Then the last part is putting your arrows on here. So it says the left arrow should be going up and the right arrow should be going down. There's no bounces, nothing squared. So all of these are going to go right through these points. I'm kind of guessing where that first one turns, and then it should look something like that. Okay. All right. Number 5 then. This one's a little bit trickier on the degree because I see 2 X's. Now they're both squared. So just remember that technically that means like there's 2x plus 1s and there's actually also 2x minus 2s. So if you wrote that all out, there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 X's, which is still an even number. Leading coefficient is positive. There's nothing in front. So even and positive means the arrows are both up. Okay. X-intercepts are just still the opposites of these. The square doesn't affect that. So -1 and 2. So we can plot those. Okay, y-intercept, same as before. Plug in a 0 for x. So it's 0 plus 1, don't forget the squared. 0 minus 2, don't forget the squared. Okay, so that's 1 squared and then -2 squared. 1 squared is 1. -2 squared is +4, so that's just going to be 4. Okay, so that's on the y-axis. So I said 2 up arrows, so it's going to be like this and like this. So we have to decide how we're going to connect those. Now we said before when a factor is squared, you have to bounce. So actually both of these are going to bounce. So I'm not going to go through this point. I'm just going to bounce and come back up and bounce and come back up. Right? It's not going to go through either of those. That one kind of looks like a W. Okay? All right, so how about you pause me, try number 6 on your own, and then unpause and come back and check. All right, I'm going to actually start with the degree. So the degree is 1, 2, 3, so that's odd, leading coefficient positive. So odd and positive means down, up, because the right arrow is up. Odd means opposite. X-intercepts are the opposites of your factors. So x equals 3, x equals 7, and x equals -1. So you can plot those. Okay, down arrow, up arrow. Okay, zeros are the same thing as x-intercepts. They're exactly the same. They mean the same thing. So I can actually just copy those down. And then y-intercept, same as the other ones. Plug a 0 in for x, just exactly as the equation looks. So you got -3 times -7 times 1. -3 times -7 is +21 times 1. So yes, this is going to go off your graph. That's okay. So that'll be like actually pretty higher than that, but you get the idea. There's nothing that's squared. So it's going to go through all of these points, and your graph should look something like that. All right, last graphing one, number 7. So degree on this one is actually odd because there's actually 2 here and then 1 here, so that's odd. Leading coefficient negative. So odd negative would mean up, down. Right arrow's down. Okay, your x-intercepts are the opposites of your factors, so that's -2 and +3. I'll put those on my graph. We said up, down. Okay, y-intercept, don't forget the negative. 0 plus 2 squared, 0 minus 3. You can do this in a calculator too, but order of operations says parentheses first, and then exponents. So 2 squared is 4. So -4 times -3 is +12. So again, that one's going to go a little off your graph, probably about there. Okay, now just remember that this one has a squared on it. So at that factor, you're going to have a bounce. Okay, that x-intercept is the opposite of that. So that's this point right here, the -2. That one it's going to bounce off of. So it's going to come bounce off of it, go up to my y-intercept, and then come back down. Okay, x-intercepts are same as zeros. Forgot that part. so that's a bunch of practice on graphing. Last thing then is just writing the equations. 10 goes here, by the way. So if we want to write this in factored form, this is just the opposite of what we were just doing. So if these are the zeros, okay, if that's the 0, the factor and the zeros are opposites. So if that's positive 3, the factor would be x minus 3. This one would be x plus 2, and the last one would be x minus 7. That's your equation right there. Technically, when you write a function, you can put f of x, but then it's exactly what we just said right there. Okay, simple as that. So the next ones are pretty much the same thing. So if I wanted to write my x-intercepts first, it's like I have one at -3, +1, and 2, right? It's the place the graph crosses the x-axis. My leading coefficient is based off of the right arrow. So since that's going down, this one's going to be negative. So I know I have to have a negative in front. And then I'm just going to take these x-intercepts and write them as factors. So remember, it's always the opposite. So it would look something like that. Okay, so pause me, try number 12, come back, check it, and then we're all done. All right, so x-intercept at, you could write these as points. I've just been writing them as x equals -2, 1, and that's a 3. Right arrow is up, so leading coefficient's positive, so you don't need anything in front. So we have x plus 2, because it's the opposite, x minus 1, because it's the opposite, and x minus 3, because it's the opposite, okay? Now the only other thing that's going on this one, it's right here. That's a bounce. So if there's a bounce at -2, on that factor, you have to have the squared, right? So there has to be a squared there. And then that's your equation. All right, so hopefully you answer the practice questions and you're ready for a retake. Thanks.